Yeah, just sure. If you don't mind, just basically give you a quick overview of who Christian is for everybody. So as Christian just mentioned, he's going to talk about the latest exciting updates from the core rule set 4. And Christian himself is very highly enthusiastic about open source and the OWASP community. So he's been in the OWASP community for quite a few years now, and also holds a PhD in medieval history and enjoys reenacting medieval history by defending castles across Europe. Of course, you can't really make a living out of that, so he turned into his attention to defending web applications for the past 15 years, which he finds equally challenging. So yeah, also he is the author of the second edition of the Mod Security Handbook. So feel free to read that if you want to learn more, and also known as a teacher on the subject. Also, Christian is a frequent speaker at conferences, including the AppSecEU right now, as well as various OWASP meetups, where he tries to use his background in humanities to explain hardcore technical topics to audiences of different backgrounds. Christian, feel free to share your screen and get started.
Okay, thank you very much, Dan. Happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation. Do you see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Very good. So what's new in CRS4? And what's the plan for today? Plan for today is I'm going giving a brief overview of what our project actually is, news from Planet CRS, and then what you're all really here for is the new features of the upcoming major release, CRS4. So what is CRS? What is mod security? We're wearing safety belts in a car, not because we think it will solve all safety issues. We're no longer going to accident. No, accidents still happen, but if they happen, we're better off. It's a good return on investment. It's a good baseline safety measure. And CRS is very similar. It's a good safety measure, a basic security measure, a good return on investment. You're still going to be attacked. You might still be exploited, but if it happens, it's less severe. You have more time to defend, and more attackers will give up because of CRS. So CRS is no 100% protection, but it's a good baseline. And we basically say 80% of the attacks, at least 80% of the attacks will no longer be effective if you secure your site with CRS. Mod security is the engine beneath CRS, and that works like a Swiss watch, if you want. It's highly mechanical. There is no artificial intelligence involved here. This is no next generation. This is just traditional rule-based engineering. But the engine is naked, and what we need to employ to really get any protection is rules on top. And the rules on top is the CRS project. So CRS comes in and provides mod security with the rule set. You have the engine and then the configuration, that is the rules on top. And we dub ourselves as the first line of defense, meaning we expect a layered defense, we expect a secure application developers that are aware of security coding practices. And if they do the job, we can help them by buying them more time. Or if they might make mistakes, maybe we can cover that. Maybe we can mitigate vulnerabilities. That's our role. We're not the sole layer of defense, we're the first layer of defense. And as such, we're not perfect, but we're pretty good and try to improve as we move along. Good. How do we fare? Simon Bennett talked about the vulnerable applications. Here is one vulnerable application. On the left, vulnerable application without any protection. And then the second column is CRS, a 5-minute default installation. And as I just mentioned, 80% of the security problem is not gone, but at least hidden. 80% of the exploits no longer work. And in this particular example, burp was no longer able to execute an SQL injection against this vulnerable application. And this was a trained burp user here. This is not a 5-minute burp user. So this is a 5-minute CRS against a highly skilled master student employing burp and doing this as his research. So the second column is the basic CRS, and then as you move through the right, the colored columns get smaller and smaller. These are higher paranoia levels. CRS works with a mechanism that we call paranoia level, and the higher paranoia level basically means more rules, more aggressive rules, more paranoia rules. These rules come with strings attached. They lead to more and more false positives. So when you deploy paranoia level 4 CRS, the application basically stops working because it has so many false positives. And then you tune away the false positives and have it work again. But that is a substantial investment in time and resources, while as the default installation in the second column pretty much works. There might be false positives, there might be rough edges, but the default installation is meant to be a smooth ride. But then if you have a higher security appetite, then you raise the paranoia level and get better and better protection. By better protection, you will also be protected pretty good from cross-site scripting. Cross-site scripting is greatly reduced by default installation, but it's kind of tough to really protect against cross-site scripting because there's so many different attack techniques involved. And local file inclusion is mostly really gone already in default installation, even more so at higher paranoia levels. So this is a basic overview of the project. Does this really work? I've talked about this. Does this really work? This is a blog post by a Finnish guy called Tuomo Makon, who looked at different cloud WAF offerings, and he came out with the result that basically the green columns are cool and the green columns are based on CRS, as you can see. So the AWS WAF is honestly pretty lame if you compare the numbers. Remote command execution 4% blocked, Azure WAF 71% blocked. So there you go with the AWS one. But it's not very good. And on the right, you have the Cloudflare WAF that is based on CRS, but they apparently haven't enabled all the rules. So it really depends a bit, and it helps to compare the different offerings. So this was a blog post, I think, from last year. And lately, we saw an article in Dark Reading covering a presentation of Black Hat Asia this spring, where the guys, a group of Chinese researchers concluded that mod security, they developed a new tool and it was able to bypass mod security, and mod security, that's us. People always speak of mod security when they mean CRS. So they were able to bypass CRS and mod security in 3% of their cases, while as 63% of the cases for Amazon Web Services. Same result as Thomas Macon, more or less. The number different, really depends on the attack, but we're doing pretty good, which doesn't mean we're perfect, and I'll get back to that. So it's a constant strive to improve the rule set, to close existing holes, to look at the remaining 3% here. Can we do something about this? Can we update something? And actually, the guy named here, Zhengqing Kuo from China, contacted us with his findings before he presented at Black Hat Asia. Good. So news from Planet CRS. If you're using mod security, and you're probably aware that the owner of mod security, the owner of the open source software, announced that they will stop to develop mod security in 2024, and they have already stopped selling contracts for that. They're selling support contracts for mod security, and somebody will either have to take this over, or the software will become legacy. We tried to take it over already. OWASP tried, OWASP and approached Trustwave. So the executive director approached Trustwave and asked them, if you want to get out of this, why don't you hand it over immediately and we can continue seamlessly with the development? And they were not interested. So they said, we're going to stop in 2024, and if you want to take it over, let's talk in 2024. We think that is much too late. We think somebody new should be covering mod security immediately, but that's not how things stand. Situation is not as bleak as it sounds. Mod security is stable and the software works, and the intelligence is in the rule set and not in the engines to the widest extent. However, there is still a new kid on the block. There is now a new alternative open source web application firewall engine, Corazza. Corazza is a new piece of software that is not really able to be a drop-in replacement for mod security immediately, but already works for cloud-enabled web servers like Caddy and I think also Traffic. And the Corazza developers, there are multiple ones now, namely Juan Pablo Tosso, is now creating an Nginx module out of Corazza. So the idea is to become a drop-in replacement for mod security. And I'm pretty confident by 2024, this will actually be the case. He thinks Corazza on Nginx should be productive during the year. So even if mod security might become legacy, no longer actively developed, there are alternatives around. There is now a new open source alternative to mod security, and there are additional commercial implementations, quite a few ones actually. I cannot dig into this here because it takes too much time, but several commercial offerings are based on forks or re-implementation of the mod security rule language. So you're not left in the rain with mod security, even if it becomes end of life. Good. We have overhauled the complete CRS documentation. I can show you this. So at the core rule set website, when you click on documentation, you get a completely new documentation, really down to the operating level. Use containers, log handling. Oh, these are a bit bleak. Let's look at development, writing rules, testing the rules. That is much more detailed. Yeah, that's a good one, isn't it? And what is also very interesting is the sandbox. That is supposed to be the next slide. Yes, the sandbox. Sandbox is a demo site for CRS. That means you don't have to install this yourself to test it out. What you can, for example, do if you're a user or a potential user and you received a report from a penetration tester, a SAP report maybe, and say, hey, look, you have a weakness in your application. Then you can take this weakness and try it out against the CRS sandbox. Here is an example call. I'm going to do this, take this over. Here is what happens. I'm making that a bit larger. Yeah, last one is pretty bleak. So I'm calling the sandbox core rule set.org. I'm giving it an additional HTTP header and saying, give me the rules in the response, human readable as text format. And the URI has a query string that is actually a local file inclusion, attack or payload. So I'm attacking, so to say, the sandbox. And the sandbox will not give me a standard HTML response, welcome to my website. It responds with the CRS log file. So you attack the sandbox, and the sandbox tells you, hey, I detected this as an attack. In fact, I detected an OS file access attempt, and I detected the remote command execution, Unix shellcode found. And this gives us a score of 10. We're doing CRS as anomaly scoring, whatever that is, but that's a characteristic of the rule set. So first 2 detection rules, and afterwards 2 administration or reporting rules here. Let's try this again. I'll do something else. Bin bash. And I call the parameter exec. Of course, it doesn't work. There is no application that is vulnerable here. But CRS is running, and now I have a different rule. No, it's the same one. So Unix shellcode found for the bin bash. And we can also do, let's try out alert. Just to give you an example, so I hope to trigger yes 3 separate cross-site scripting rules were triggered for a total score of 5. So this is the CRS sandbox. If you look at the documentation, there is a lot more to be had with the sandbox. You can try out different versions of CRS. You have nightly builds. You can try out different paranoia levels, like would a higher paranoia level catch this attack that is not called by default? Would it catch if I raise the paranoia level to 2? So before I deploy this on a production server, I try this out via the sandbox. You can have different backends. So on CRS on mod security on Apache, you can have mod security on Nginx, or you can have the new Carasa on Caddy backend. So many, many different options with the sandbox. And this has been really, really useful already. We deployed this last November, or we announced this last November. What else do we have? We have run a private bug bounty program, actually 2 of those. We did one in February together with a big CRS user that paid for this. And back in February, they used elite bug bounty hunters, and none of the elite bug bounty hunters found anything. They probably didn't dig deep enough because they were so focused on their favorite vulnerabilities that they were not interested to really dig into CRS, look at the regular expression, try to find a way around it, etc., etc. They would probably much just give up. Then that big integrator approaches again to do a second bug bounty with higher bounties, higher payout, and they would select WAF security researchers, so people who had published about web application firewall bypasses before. They approached them, invited them to the program, and that program has been a huge success in terms of findings and payouts. Not so much a huge success in brushing our egos. We were really shot to pieces. They have found a lot of bypasses, many of them highly severe, and we're now cleaning up what happened during the bug bounty. And it's, truth be told, several dozens of findings, and it's not like this is going to take an afternoon to fix. This is serious work that will keep us busy for several months, actually. So we had, can already say this, we had planned for CRS4 to come out, but now we have so many new findings or vulnerabilities or things that we don't cover that we cannot bring out CRS4 immediately. Instead, we have to fix these bypasses. Good. We also are running a Dev on Duty program. This is not exactly new. This has been running for more than a year. And Dev on Duty means we're covering several channels with first level support. So we're on the OWASP Slack. If you have a CRS question, approach us on the OWASP Slack. And there is some CRS developer who's guaranteed to respond to you within a useful time frame. The same happens on GitHub. If you open a question on GitHub, an issue on GitHub will respond to you, guaranteed. You can also do that on Twitter. You can do this on the CRS mailing list, also on the mod security mailing list, which is separate. And you can even do this on Stack Overflow or Stack Exchange. We're scanning Twitter and these channels for certain keywords. And if core rule set is mentioned or hashtag is mentioned that we're covering, then we're going to respond. So we have a Dev on Duty program that is paid by sponsors and that provides first level support. You have a simple problem with CRS, we give you the simple solution. You have a bigger problem with CRS, the Dev on Duty will guide you to open an issue, to test this more thoroughly, to give us the log files that we really need, etc. So that's highly useful, paid for by sponsors. Very useful. And I think it's also nice for an open source project to guarantee support for open source users, non-paying open source users, and having a sponsors provide us with the means to do that. Good. So what are now these major changes for CRS v4 that was supposed or planned to be released in June 2022 before we launched that second private bug bounty event? We have a plugin architecture. CRS is a rule set, and CRS is a collection of mod security rules, mostly regular expressions that you enable. Plugins are now a way for you to write your own rules and use existing CRS functionality. What you can very easily do is you add your own detection rules. So we have a couple of SQL injection rules, and then you add a rule that detects something else that is not mainline so far. But give you an example, I'm constantly being scanned with certain URIs that I don't run on this server. They are going to result in a 404. But I want to block them with 403, also to have them in the log as an attacker for statistics, etc. I'm not happy with the 404. I want to have them as a 403. So I wrote my own plugin that would blend in with CRS and then use the anomaly scoring mechanism and the error page that I defined for CRS, etc., etc. So I piggyback the whole blocking mechanism and the reporting of CRS4 by writing my own rules. Before CRS4, right now, CRS3, it's relatively difficult to add a rule into the rule set. It will always be separate. You have to do the housekeeping yourself. With CRS4, we include rules deployed to a certain folder, and we give you the documentation how to write these rules. We're accepting third-party plugins. I'm going to get back to that afterwards. And some existing functionality has been taken out of CRS and moved into separate plugins. Why did we do this? We did this in order to reduce the attack surface of CRS. Plugins have been a potential weakness, and we had a CVE in 2021 on a broken plugin. It had a bug, and we didn't see that, and it was exploitable and expandable. It was a high severity plugin defect that affected not only the plugin, not only the rule exclusion thing, but the entire rule set. So rule exclusions have been moved to plugins. Rule exclusions are a way to deal with false positive, something we provide, and we removed them now from the mainline distribution. We also removed exotic mod security functionality that we use in a very limited way in CRS. That is now a plugin, meaning the mainline CRS is simpler. If you want to run your own WAF engine with CRS, so you re-implement mod security, run CRS, you have less work to do because the mainline CRS has less functionality or uses less functionality. It has more rules, but less functionality for mod security that it uses. And of course, plugin architecture allows us to accept third-party rule sets in the future, which is really cool. Somebody else can write rules to integrate with CRS. And that architectural change, in terms of mod security, it's no big thing. But in terms of project architecture, it's a huge thing. So big, we decided to name the next major release CRS4. It's a CRS with plugins. We also bring early blocking. If you're familiar with how HTTP works, you have request header, HTTP request header phase, and then you have HTTP request body phase. A GET request will do the request URI and a few headers and be done with it. A POST request or a file upload will bring a request body. And for the web server and for the web application firewall, that's a separate phase in the request. And we do early blocking, meaning we block immediately after the headers now, or we can immediately block after the headers now. And that is a new feature. I mean, this sounds so natural, but it's actually a new feature. In CRS3, we would block after everything, the entire request has been executed and the entire request has arrived at the web server. With early blocking, we stop after request header have been received. We look at the anomaly score, and if it has to be, then we block before the file upload has even started. So that is early blocking. Nice feature that saves a few resources, and you're no longer talking to people that want to attack you. If it's easily visible they're an attacker, why accepting a post request from them? We renamed the scoring variables and paranoia level. That doesn't really change the working of the project, but it affected every rule. So that's a big, big change. And the naming is now a bit more consistent. It's a bit easier, and it has been cleaned up. Honestly, CRS4 scoring variables and how the scoring worked and how the arithmetics behind the scoring worked, it was really, really ugly. And it's much cleaner now and much easier to understand, and of course a lot better document as well. We have configurable reporting levels. Going back to this one here, this is a reporting rule, and with CRS4 there is no way or no standard way to disable this if you don't like this, or if you want to have more information, there's also no way. You cannot influence this. With CRS4 we have a reporting level. I personally, for example, I don't like this rule. I disable that rule. I don't want to see it. This isn't good enough for me, and this one is not interesting. So now with CRS4, I can set this reporting level to 0, and everything is gone. Or you have the ability to put everything, I think, on 4 or reporting level 5, which is really useful for Nginx, which behaves a bit differently. And this gives you information that you cannot obtain on Nginx with CRS4 version 3. You would have to write your own custom rules. With CRS4, and it suddenly works thanks to the reporting level. We're also no longer depending on the Perl compatible regular expression engine. That's the traditional fully enhanced, big, heavy, slow regular expression engines with a tons of feature. We're ready for RE2 and Hyperscan, so alternative, simpler regular expression engines that have less performance issue, and they're not vulnerable to regular expression denial of service. Regular expression denial of service is, as the name implies, an attack on the regular expression parser or library, and you kill the CPU of the server by specially crafted regular expressions. We're especially affected by this because we're an open source project, and everybody can look up our regular expressions, identify regular expressions that are prone to such attacks, and then develops the special crafted payload to attack CRS and kill the CPU via mod security and a Perl compatible regular expression using a special advanced functionality. We simplified the rule set again. So again, a simplification like the plugin architecture, simpler like anomaly scoring variables, simpler, and now regular expression, simpler. We're no longer depending on the special PCRE dialect. We're now using the simpler baseline regular expression functionality that the different engines share. So that's a step forward and a simplification as well. That's this whole simplification, cleanup, consolidating, streamlining is a base. I would say it's one of the goals ever since we took over the project in 2015 or 16. We have simplified so many things, and there's still things that can be easier to employ, easier to develop, easier to use in production, easier to operate, making everybody's life easier. But it's hard work to get there, and this whole PCR business has been going on for several years, actually, until we're finally ready. CRS4 has quite a few rules. I'd say it's 1-2 dozen that use PCRE dialect, and with CRS4 we're done with that. And finally, we added a lot of tests. With every CRS release, we added more tests, and we have streamlined this again, or consolidated. So we have positive and negative tests on each and every rule now. This is, of course, very useful for us. That's a quality measure for us. If we change a rule, tests already in place, we'll hopefully immediately notice when the rule no longer works. But it's also very useful for users. For example, you can take our test suite and test it against a cloud provider. I can say, is this really blocked? Is this really working? Right now, the tests work by looking at the log file. So using it against the cloud provider is not so easy. But ongoing development is to look at the status code. No longer look at the log file, did the correct rule trigger? No, look at the error code and see, oh, apparently the following rule must have triggered because the attack payload has been detected. This obviously only works if you have a test that is distinct, that is atomic in the sense that it is only triggering a single rule. And if that test is being blocked by a cloud provider, then you know they have the following CRS rule enabled. And if it's not, but our test suite says it should, then you know they have disabled a certain rule. And then you could also start to compare different WAF products. So our test suite is really important for us, and it will grow in importance as you move forwards because the tests will be clearer, more narrow, more to the point. Very useful. Good. The plugins. So all rule exclusions are now plugins. We used to provide rule exclusions packages. That means if you're running WordPress, the following rules are likely to trigger. So what we're doing is giving you a package of rule exclusions that will disable the following rule in the WordPress context. And we did this, we had this for WordPress, for Drupal, for PHP, PB Forum, several other standard softwares, not too many, half a dozen or a dozen, but still useful. And we moved that to plugins, also to make it easier for these communities around standard software to write rule exclusion plugins themselves, provide them themselves, and then we can list them in our plugin registry. So all the rule exclusions are now plugins. We have an antivirus plugin. Mod Security has antivirus functionality, or it allows you to integrate an antivirus software. It's relatively easy to scan file uploads. And we didn't support this because it's a complicated Mod Security functionality to do so. It usually works via Lua code embedded in the web server. And we don't want that in mainline CRS. CRS is supposed to be simple. CRS is not supposed to be program code running on the WAF. However, there are very useful situations where you want to have that. So that's a plugin now. Antivirus plugin integrates with Bayesian span or antivirus filtering. Sorry, not Bayesian, but antivirus filtering, like the standard SpamD. Good. Then we have the auto decoding plugin. You can encode your attack, typically base 64, but you can also hex encode an attack. And as you maybe know, database servers, they hex decode queries. You could submit an SQL query in hex, and the database server is very likely to execute it. However, CRS is blind. I mean, hex encoded, that looks really odd. And unless you teach Mod Security, by the way, the following payload is supposed to be hex encoded, then Mod Security and CRS will be blind. Now, there is an auto decoding plugin that will test whether this is hex encoded or not, and whether it's base 64 encoded or not, or if it's URI encoded or not. And if it is, then it will automatically decode it. So the hex the hex encoded SQL query will become a readable SQL query. Then standard rule CRS rules apply, and the attack will be detected and subsequently blocked. Interesting on top is the auto decoding does dual encoding on top. So you can base64 encode a hex encoded SQL query, and the auto decoding plugin with CRS will actually detect it. Of course, this uses a lot of CPU, but if you really want to be secure in a high security setting, that could really make sense. We have a body decompress plugins because you can upload request compressed request body and request responses, and that plugin decompresses them automatically. And I don't run this myself, so I cannot really tell you much about it, how this works, and when it is really useful, because usually you don't want to have compression on the WAF. But the FakeBot plugin I use myself. What is a FakeBot? A FakeBot is a client that pretends to be a search engine crawler. It crawls your website, faking a user agent belonging to one of the big search engines. And you will probably allow it because, hey, you want to be indexed by the search engine. And that's how they work around you, your defenses. However, the fake bot makes a link between the client IP address and the user agent. And it does a reverse lookup. Take the idea of the Twitter bot, for example. Twitter bot scans the internet, crawls the internet or looks up links on the internet, whatever. And it's when it does so via HTTP request, it says in user agent, hey, I'm the Twitter bot. So we do a reverse lookup on the IP address. And if that says, hey, I'm a free server from DigitalOcean, then go, hold on, you're not Twitter bot, because Twitter bot, the IP address of Twitter resolves to Twitter bot. We know that. That is guaranteed to work. And if you're on a cheap online server that you purchased somebody or stole somewhere, then you're not Twitter bot, and we're going to flag you as a fake bot, and we're going to block you. Ever since I've been running this, about a third of the search engine crawlers are now identified as fake bots, and we can block them immediately. And I think that's quite substantial, namely if you're a big site. So that's quite useful, and we can easily expand the fake bot to additional user agents that are known to come from via known IP addresses that actually resolve this thing. And then we have a Google OAuth 2 plugin that simplifies using Google OAuth 2. This is not Google OAuth by itself, but if you are using Google OAuth, then this plugin actually helps you work with CRS. So these are all the plugins that CRS4 will be released with. You can use them already, but it will take a bit of tweaking. And once CRS4 comes out, it will be super easy to use all these plugins. Good. Yes, there are still 2 in the making. They're not done yet. This was existing CRS3 functionality that is now being moved into the plugin architecture. We're not yet there. Good. What new rules do we have? We're better at server-side request forgery. We're better at detecting this. We have new rules that know common server-side request forgery patterns where they reach out over the internet to known IP addresses, or it looks as if they reach out over the internet to an IP address. We detect all this in various crazy formats. You can express an IP address in octal, what do you call it, an octal encoding, and it's still an IP address, and it works. Linux will happily make such HTTP request, and we identify octal encoded IP addresses, for example. We added rules for the 3 email protocols. I mean, that's quite unusual to do a POP attack via HTTP, but it exists, and now we will detect it. We enhanced the rule set a bit for Log4Shell and for Spring4Shell as well. We had decent rules against Log4Shell the moment it came out. However, the way this developed relatively quickly, we had to add an additional rule. We were not covering against all the evasions that were popping up within a few days or weeks. So we had to add an additional rule to protect against Log4Shell. And we have common web shell detection. So if somebody installs a web shell and using it over your web server, we will probably detect it. We have, I think, more than 40 or 50 web shells that we detect now on the way out in response rules. And then we improve the detection across the board for remote command execution, SQL injection, cross-site scripting, you name it. We improved the rule set, and we're still doing that. I talked about the bug bounty. Of course, the bug bounty brought to light existing attacks that bypassed the rule set. And we're improving the detection now based on these findings. Let me come to the release plan. It's originally planned for May, June 2022. And then the moment we announced we're going to release in May, June 2022, that bug bounty program launched. I mean, that was a bit, the coincidence was a bit unfortunate, but apparently we have a sponsor doing this for us. Somebody paid for this bug bounty, so they got to decide when they were going to do this. And they were ready in April, so we had to be ready in April too. And they shot us to pieces. They found many bypasses. We kind of expected them, but they also found bypasses in higher paranoia levels. And they also managed, in one or two cases, to bypass mod security altogether. So there will be, there are now vulnerabilities that we need to fix in mod security. So we need to go approach TrustWave and other integrators of CRS to our engines. We're talking to Carasa as well about these weaknesses in the end in the mod security engines or implementations of the re-implementation of the mod security engine. So the release plan no longer worked, and we need to literally fix dozens of findings first because we can look at the release of CRS4 again. Apparently this takes time. It's really unfortunate, but we cannot release when we know there are weaknesses in it. So we have to fix first, and this postpones the release. Some of the findings will going to be backported. So existing CRS3 release lines, we're officially supporting CRS 3.3, sometimes also 3.2, and users are still using 3.1. So we're going to push backports at least for 3.2 and 3.3 with some of these findings. Not all of them, because we usually don't release new rules for all the releases because they bring new false positive. That's why we don't do that. But here we might have to do this for certain of these findings. And then we'll do a new release plan once we see a bit clearer. We're still recovering from the bug bounty, and we're still developing a plan how to address all these findings first. We're now in the assessment phase where we look at the findings again and again until we are sure we have understood the real extent of the finding. Some of the findings are more dangerous on second sight, maybe more dangerous that the reporter realized him or herself. So we look at them again and again, and we're prioritizing and we're adding severities. It's all quite a bit of work, so this is a bit tedious and it takes time. But after summer, we hope to be ready with a new release plan, obviously delayed a bit of time. Good. I'd like, before I come to the end of my talk, to thank our gold sponsors, Nginx, part of F5, and Progress, our gold sponsor. We have one or two additional gold sponsors that we haven't announced yet. And we also have a silver sponsor, Google, who is sponsoring as part of their open source program. What we do with the sponsoring money is financing the Dev on Duty program. I mentioned that. And we also financed Developer Summit last year. So this keeps us going. And I think it's a very nice model that we can provide support thanks to these sponsors. And with this, I think I'm perfectly in time and I'm done with my presentation. Happy to answer to your questions. I plan to post it to URIs. You saw this dark reading article, etc., on Twitter after the presentation. So maybe you want to follow me if you're not doing that already. And with that, I'm open to the questions.
Great. Thank you very much, Christian, for the great overview of the CRS4, including the sandbox and what's been added, as well as the release plan. And we actually got quite a few questions from the audience.
Cool.
So the first one is by Valentin, who asked about the research done from Tuomo Makkonen that is from 2020. Yes. Is there any reason you believe the scores are still similar, or do you think the cloud WASP has improved?
Yeah. I think they're similar because the blog post confirmed our impression, which has never had the numbers. But yeah, let's say our feeling was that Azure had better coverage than Cloudflare. By just dealing with it, working with customers sometime, I'm working on professionally on CRS. My impression was that Azure is better, and he proved that. And the release cycles of these commercial integrators are relatively slow. I mean, if you go to Azure, you will see that they're really supporting old CRS releases. So I think they're slow in picking up. And why are they slow? Because they're really afraid of false positive. False positives are a major issue for a commercial WAF provider. And the reason that Cloudflare has less good coverage for certain attack classes is false positive. I mean, they get too many hits on otherwise happy users, and that is risky for them. If you get money from selling a WAF, then you don't want to see a false positive, because the customer will be pissed. I mean, if you lose sales because of a false positive, then you will be pissed with the WAF provider. So I understand the commercial integrators, they need to guard some. How many false positives are they willing to accept? And different integrators have different approach to that, maybe found different solutions to the problem. We're not really insiders there. We talk to like all of them by now, but we don't always know what they're doing exactly. And they have found different solutions. For many of them, it's only part of their security posture. They have additional measures on top, and you kind of buy a whole package from them, or you run CRS yourself, and then you're the king of the hill, and you use exactly the rules that you want to. So I would say the image is relatively stable. It's not changing much. And news I didn't share is we're working on a so-called status page where we're going to do the work by Tuomo Makkonen live. So we're going to talk to the Cloudflare server like every day with our test suite and report back and say, our test suite says the following rules are active and the following rules are not active on the following installation. On AWS, AWS also has a CRS offering, by the way. There we get these rules, in Cloudflare you get this, on Azure you get the following, and Fastly you get the following, and so on. So you'll be able to differentiate between different offerings. We'll bring transparency to the markets, but we think we're going to confirm Tuomo Makkonen.
Interesting. Thank you, Christian. There is another question that's actually coming from myself, and it's just out of curiosity, what are some of the planned features for upcoming releases of CSS?
Oh, we're going to do CRS4 first. Afterwards, planned features, I cannot really tell. No, the plugin architecture is so cool. I mean, we had this in mind. It's so simple. Let's do a plugin architecture. But once you do it, the ideas start to pop out. So we expect third-party plugins we expect to be an inspiration and be inspired ourselves to write plugins, and we can later on decide, hey, let's take this into the standard rule set. Like say, hey, look, this plugin is really popular. That's really working. Like this fake bot thing is so cool. It's so simple and it really works. So I think the plugin can be like a test bed, or the crazy stuff is being tried out. And in the plugin, this is where the movement is going to be. There we see new stuff. And then CRS, the official release line, will be a bit slower, a bit more conservative, where you have to test that stuff. And I cannot really say what is going to happen. I guess we're going to be more independent from the engine. So with Corazza arriving, mod security maybe becoming legacy, multiple commercial re-implementations, we become less depending on mod security. So that is certain a trend, and also on our roadmap. We want to become independent, and that means we're going to be more rule language agnostic. We're now depending apparently on the mod security rule language. And if you've read mod security rule language yourself, then that is really painful. But if we say the intelligence is in the rules, that means actually in the regular expression. And why do we have to express the regular expression in a mod security rule language? I can take the regular expression and use it as a Java input validation filter. So, and technically it's relatively easy. It's already been done, by the way. And we could say, hey, let's become really independent. Let's have transformation tools that allow you to use CRS on your existing framework. And there's commercial users doing this already, and we see developing that direction as well. Well, I'm taking too much time for these questions.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. And for everybody, there's some more questions, but if you just head to the Slack channel or just on the Wova app and just get in touch directly with Christian, just to answer your question. I mean, he's very active in the community, and I'm certain that all of your answers will be covered there.
Sure.
So thank you, Christian, very much for presenting the project updates. Really glad to have you here. And all like the interesting updates. There's a lot of things to come, I see. And as
Absolutely.
I said, there's also is a very active project. So if you want to get involved, just head to the OWASP project page, get in touch with Christian directly via Slack channel, or just go on the GitHub page and check out some of the issues. Again, thank you very much, Christian, for attending today.
Good fun. And thanks for having me.
Awesome.
Hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you. Bye.